What do CEOs need to know about sales these days? A lot. Outdated sales strategies and tactics plague most companies today. Listen to what innovative CEOs and experts have to say about how to change all that with Sales Talk for CEOs. Welcome to Sales Talk for CEOs. Today, I have a topic that I know everyone's going to really want to dive into. CEOs want their sellers to do larger deals with larger companies. And a lot of people are talking about going upstream from where they are right now. What we want to do is figure out, how can we do it, right? How do we move from where we are in the marketplace to larger companies? And how do we do those larger deals with larger companies? So I'm excited because I have the author of Mega Deal Secrets with me today, Jamal Reimer, and we're going to have a great conversation about just how you can accomplish this. Welcome to the show, Jamal.
Hey, Alice, it's great to be here.
And you're in Portugal. What a wonderful place to be calling in from.
I can't complain. It's nice to be on this end of being lucky this time, coming from the top of Europe in Sweden to Portugal now. So yeah, it's great.
Yeah, very good. And you spent many years at Oracle as a seller and closed some really large deals. But I understand that you weren't always a great closer of large deals. You had to work into it. So let's start there and tell us a little bit about that.
I mean, the short story is I was less than average for, let's say, the most of the first half of my 20-year career. And I bounced around and I tried to model what other people did. And there wasn't really great mentoring or training. And some years I would make my number, but you know what, I'd say about more than half the time I wouldn't. And so it was nice to finally learn how to get out of that ultimately. But yeah, the first 10 years were very hit and miss.
And I think that's true for a lot of sellers, and CEOs are wondering, like, why do some sellers really struggle, right? And why can some of them just really hit the ground running and close those bigger deals? And I think sometimes it feels like a mystery to all of us, but I don't think it's a mystery at all. As you learn, there are some things that sellers can do to be more consistent. And as CEOs and leaders, we need to learn to support that. So moving into these larger deals, especially if you want to do larger deals with larger companies, the consistency is key. But let's talk about some of the other keys to being able to find these large deals and close them.
One of the first thing that comes to mind when you ask that question is not only from my own experience, but from teaching and training and coaching others to do it. The first thing that comes to mind is that larger deals are very front loaded.
Yeah.
And what that looks like is there's a lot of effort up front to learn as much as possible about the company's overall reality, the things that are important to the CEO and the other members of the C-suite, what pressure they might be under from investors or customers, et cetera. And that's an art and a science that a lot of sellers and even go-to-market teams either don't know about or don't really leverage. And then that upfrontness just kind of continues, where a lot of go-to-market team, and I say go-to-market teams because it's not just the sellers, right? It's management, and it's the sales engineering teams, et cetera.
It's truly a team, because selling is a team sport, right?
So much so, and that's going to branch our conversation in a whole bunch of different things. But you asked me, what are some of the kind of the pillar concepts of doing these larger deals? One is that they're very front loaded. Two is what you said, it's a team sport. And three, it's almost like the level of discourse is very, very different. There's a senior language and set of priorities, and there's an operational or kind of worker bee, on the floor, almost a different set of concerns. And CEOs have a huge ability to either lift or establish that more senior track at the right time, right? And cameo appearance is not taking over the job of the seller, but being a part of that discourse.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that's an important piece we're going to definitely connect on here today. But let's go back and start with okay, we are doing some pretty good deals. And we occasionally do a larger deal, whatever that is considered for your company, something that's 2 to 5 to 10x the size of your normal deal, right? But as a CEO, how do you start moving your team that direction? Because I feel like it has to come from the strategy of the company, right? So here we are in the market that we're in, doing what we're doing. And now the CEO and the senior leaders say, hey, we're going to move up market. We want to, get some whales, get some larger deals with larger companies, maybe even just some larger deals at the current companies. Where does it start? Like, what's kind of the first step to launching this with the team and saying, hey, we are going to strategically go after some larger companies and larger deals?
I think it's kind of the SWAT team approach, right? Because you don't want to just throw that open to all sellers and see how
Right.
it goes. You want to take your best and brightest and keep it to a kind of a contained effort, and point them toward some specific accounts that you have reasons to target first, and to really start it as a project, right? Not start it as a company-wide initiative with a whole bunch of training and change and everything else, but you take a specialized team that includes not only the traditional players of sales and solutions engineering, maybe marketing or implementation, but you do have that executive presence
Yeah.
to be a part of it, because when something that executives tell me, the ones that are really kind of in the weeds. I remember one conversation with a COO. He's like, I'm in all of our big deals, and time again, bigger deals happen faster when executives from both sides of the table are engaged.
Absolutely. Absolutely. 100%. So we take a smaller team, a SWAT team. We pick the right people, right? We want the right players on that team from our company. Has to have some senior executives on it because that's part of, doing big deals. And we make a list of companies, a short list, maybe only 5, right? A short list of companies that we believe we have the right solution for them, and we have reason to believe they may need that solution in the not too distant future, right? So that we can start building those relationships. So we get that short list, and then a lot of research has to happen, Jamal. So let's talk about that, because I think this is part of the reason that we fail, right? When we try to close really big deals, or even just start working with bigger companies, is we just don't know enough about them to open our mouth and say something smart, right? So let's talk about what you call that deep research.
So there are a few key points that, once I say them, they're going to sound obvious, but for lots of sellers or go-to-market teams, it's not so obvious. One is, what's the main business of the account, right? How does the account make money? What are their actual revenue streams? And can you parse out, if they've got 4 revenue streams, is there a lion's share coming in from one versus the other 3, et cetera? Second one is, what are the C-suite's really big priorities for that year? Or are they in the middle of a 3-year plan or something like that? And that, what's the ambition? What's the KPI that they're driving for? And what's the time frame that they want to get it done by? And then who owns it, right? Which member of the C-suite owns that initiative? And then the third are, what's going on in their ecosystem? What are the trends that they have to deal with just because they're in the industry that they're in, or the economic environment that they're in? Those are 3 really big pillars, and you could do a good amount of research just with those 3. And then there's a whole lot of other stuff beyond that. One real pro tip that we're digging into very deeply right now is executive compensation. So we're diving often into what motivates the very top players within a company. So you look at, for a public company, you're looking at Schedule 14A to see what's the short-term and long-term incentives for the named executive officers. Now, I don't want to geek out too much. Let me take a pause there because that's
Yeah,
probably a
I
good
hear
place
you.
to.
I hear you. So, but the more we know and understand about people's motivation, the easier it is to help guide them to a solution that helps them win, right? So we have to understand what is going on in their brain, what motivates them. But when I think about the three things that you just mentioned, then I automatically think, and we have to connect that back to our solution, right? So if our solution can't help them with the primary things their senior leaders are concerned with for this year, this period, right? Because these big companies, most of them are public companies you're trying to go after when you're talking big companies, right? And there's a lot of information available, and they have initiatives and visions and motives and things that they're doing this year with their company, or this 3-year 5-year period. And if you can't help them do that, they're probably not buying what you have, right?
100%.
So we have to match it. We have to know, what are these senior executives thinking about? What are they working on? What motivates them? What's happening in their industry? What are those trends? And we have to be able to take our solution and match it to that and show them where there's a fit, right?
100%. We call that process how to build a value story, and it's a journey, right? Because if you're saying, "Hey, what are the steps in doing this?" Well, research is a starting point, but then you got to start to talk to people, and you got to put these ideas in front of them. And so then it turns into, okay, well, let's talk with some people around the account or maybe at the mid levels and test these hypotheses. Hey, I got this hypothesis
Yeah.
of how we might be able to help. I want you to kick it around. You tell me if it's not going to work, because if it doesn't hold up, then it's not worth talking about. And then
Right.
that turns
And
into
notice that Jamal didn't say we start selling. we didn't start selling yet, right? We identify these 3 to 5 companies. We got our SWAT team on them. We do this research, and then we start building relationships so we can kick around ideas. Right?
100%. And another thing that is less utilized than I would suspect is engaging in this dialogue with the ecosystem around the account, and not just being laser focused on employees and executives of that account right now. There's former employees, there's former executives, there's systems integrators, there's boutique consultants, there's other go-to-market teams who are not competitive to you, but they're selling to the same folks in the same accounts. And they've got lots of knowledge from working with that account for years sometimes. So we don't necessarily have to start from zero. We can leverage a lot of knowledge and relationship that's already in place.
Yeah. I think it's so true. And it takes time, right? And on this idea of time, right, closing larger deals with larger companies takes a much longer time than your company may be used to, which is another reason to start small, right? With your special team and just a few accounts that you're going to go after, 3 to 5, because everybody else has to keep selling and doing what they're doing, right? To keep the dollars flowing in the door. Can't stop everything. So you have to carve out this little piece and test the waters here, because it does take time to do the research. And then you have to follow it and follow it. And like, are things changing? Are they the same? What's going on? Right. And then you're socializing with people in the industry and possibly some people at that company. And possibly you go to events or trade shows and conferences and you start to meet people and socialize this, right? And talk about it, throw these ideas around. Okay. So now we've got that piece, and it could be months, right? Just doing that much. All right. So then what happens next?
I think one of the biggest accelerants of the deal is when you feel you have enough of a value hypothesis that it's mature enough to take to senior leadership. And there's a couple of components. How am I going to get to this senior person who we've identified as the right person? And what am I going to say to her once I get there? Because I got one shot, right? It's a very pointed summit, and I can get knocked off real quick if I don't have something that's in her language. So either it's next or it's in parallel. You're looking for what's the least path of resistance to get to that senior person. And 9 times out of 10, it ain't through the seller. It's through somebody in the CEO's network or in your investors network, because at the C-suite, at the senior leadership level and the board and the investors, that's a much tighter group that has a wider reach to people of capacity and a higher likelihood to help you to get very quickly to the top of the exact mountain that you're trying to get to. Let me take a pause there because I know you got a lot to say about that.
Well, unfortunately, what sellers are doing instead is cold outreach to these senior executives. And it's so painful. I mean, it just doesn't work and it's just so painful. So, back to your research, right? So, CEOs, your team has got to do complete research, which means finding all the people at these large companies that are likely to be involved in this buying decision, who care about the outcomes, right? So we've got to have this list of names. We've got to know what level these people are at. Like you said, you're even digging into compensation to see what's motivating them and how they win, learning as much about them as you can, and then figuring out who is the best person to approach them and how that person will approach them. Now, this is where referral selling comes in big. And for me, everybody should be doing this. But again, it's just like, ouch, you sent that email to that senior executive. You probably just really hurt your chances of ever getting in, right? So we think about, how to get your company in front of this larger company with some great content or something so that they're starting to go, oh, there might be something here. Meanwhile, you've got this list of these people, these humans, and learning as much about them as we can, and then figuring out who's going to approach them and how. And it is probably not going to be the sellers at first. The sellers can come in at a certain level, right? But we need to match like levels and like types, like engineers and engineers, right? CEOs and CEOs, or sometimes if your company is rather small, maybe your CEO would only get to talk to a general manager, but it's a person who is going to lead the decision, right? So I think it's a key thing that's missed. We do what we call account-based marketing or account-based selling approach. And it kills us sometimes because we get all this research done. And then the way we go about it is by sending messaging instead of getting an introduction and getting a conversation going with the right person.
I like to say that a warm introduction is worth, sometimes 6 months of cold calling.
Oh, easily.
And to your point, it's almost binary, right? So what I hear you saying and what I believe in many instances is it's not worth it for a seller to go right for the CEO, because as you said, it's going to actually hurt your chances of moving forward because there's such a mismatch. And this just reminds me of a story of one of the best sellers that I ever met, who was at his name's Mike Biasconi, and he was at DocuSign, and he was early at DocuSign. He was like number one for like 5 years in a row. And I think it was the chairperson at the time kind of anointed him as wanting him to run their board of advisors in the early days. And so the mantra at DocuSign at the time was that the advisory board was not there to be product or industry experts. They were there to open doors.
Right.
And so Mike interfaced and even recruited, with the help of the chairperson, as many of these people with big Rolodexes, we don't even say that word anymore, but big contact lists. And it worked. And I've even seen emails, it doesn't, if the right person is connecting with another right person, you don't need a long email and you don't need a whole, volume of here's why we should talk. It's more like, hey, either I know you or we know somebody in common who we respect.
Yeah.
We've got this idea. The value is probably in the area of 5 to 10 million per year. and would love to have a chat to see if it makes sense to talk. It's simple stuff, 3 to 5 seconds.
Simple conversation. So I want to make one caveat here. There are sellers that I have known in my life that can get straight to the CEO of a big corporation and make stuff happen. It's just like a 1 in a million. It's just not something your sellers can probably do, and it should not be expected. That's all I'm saying. I can't say it doesn't happen because I know for a fact that it does. I'm just saying it's not common. And even today, it's harder than ever. Like back in the day when we were young and selling, right? We could get to CEOs sometimes. We really, really could. It wasn't that hard, but that was many, many moons ago. And today, it's just not that way. So it's important to note that although you may have one of these unicorn type of sellers that can do these things, you probably don't. So don't send them out there to fail, right? Okay, then let's back up, because if you are a small or mid-sized company, I'm going to say under $100 million, right? And you've got some sellers and you're, trying to move up market and you're trying to do larger deals with larger companies, and you put together this little SWAT team, there's probably a step even before that we missed, Jamal, that we need to tell them about. You mentioned it, and that's why I remembered. You need to put together an advisory board if you don't have one. And these need to be people, right, who can help open doors for you. That's really going to be the best path to landing these mega deals, is having those introductions available to you. And if you don't have a senior team who has that kind of, clout in the marketplace or whatever, then get some advisors who do.
This is not standard practice. I've already mentioned that I knew one seller, and he was talented to the point where the chairperson entrusted him with running the advisory board. I'm not saying that's standard practice,
right?
But another example, to your point, I worked with a seller once. He's like, "Yeah, I'd love to do this, but my executives are just not great in front of others. They're technical founders. They're not great at presenting. They're great at coding, and they don't have a big network. What can I do?" And I'm like, "Okay, you go to them and you say either they need to put together a board or give it to you." And they gave it to him. And he's in Germany, right? He's in Berlin. And so he started recruiting former executives from BMW.
Yeah.
And within the year, he was getting deals with BMW.
Yeah.
Shorten the story, but that's the impact that you can have when you have kind of like the express elevator to senior management.
Yeah. And honestly, people want to be on your board. I mean, ask, don't be shy. People like to be in an advisory capacity. And, in some cases, you can pay them or give them some equity, but not necessarily. I mean, I've been on a lot of boards where I just act as an advisor because I want to help that company succeed. And opening doors is part of that responsibility of an advisor. So I think that if you're going to do this, I want you to think seriously about who in your network as a CEO and the other senior leaders on your team, who can you gather that can help you open these doors? Because you think your sellers can do it, but we're here to tell you that's a hard road, right? That's a hard road. The sellers should put it together. They should do the research. They should gather your internal team. They should, do some reach out for sure. And they should guide the whole process and orchestrate it. And they will do the selling when it's time to sell. But they are not going to be the best ones to approach the senior executives that you're going to need to have relationships with in order to get these mega deals done.
You make me think a lot about the relationship between either the CEO or somebody at that senior level and whoever is in charge of that account. It can become a very special relationship. And this is something that I've seen some CEOs do well and others do not so well. And it's often an ego issue. You kind of need to have a good seller to make this work. When you have a good seller, it's okay to be coachable.
Yeah.
The best relationships that I've seen with a senior person and somebody who's running the account is the senior person has their day job. So if it's a CEO, the CEO has their day job, right? This is helping out with a deal. So the best thing that the seller can do is help prepare them quickly, not too long in advance, maybe the day before. Keep it to, okay, there's these 3 things that I either want you to say or discuss. Maybe stay away from this. And when the senior person says, yeah, just give me my marching orders and I'm going to execute, things can go really, really well.
Yeah. I had a great conversation with my friend David Brock about this on the podcast, where we were talking about what's the CEO's role in closing deals, especially in larger deals. And, when do you bring that CEO in and how do you prepare them? And I think that's critical. You do have to have a really good seller if you're going to do this, right? If you're going to start trying to do larger deals with larger companies, you've got to have somebody who can lead this. And it's got to be a more seasoned senior person who understands, right? Because they do have to coach the CEO and the other players on the team and all the senior leaders. It's their job to inform everybody about all the research. It's like they're not going to sit and read a huge dossier that you created. They need the bullet points of what's important about this account, what they're trying to do in the marketplace, what the trends are, who these leaders are. And then they need to know what their role is. What role am I playing? Who is this person I'm connecting with? What do we want to know from that person? How should I conduct myself? And that's really the salesperson's job. And if they don't know how to do that, you're going to have a hard time working these larger deals, right? So let's stay on that for just a minute. So you've got a CEO who wants to be involved and understands that they need to be coached. They don't just jump in, right? And you've got a seller who's orchestrating all of this. What are some of the things the seller needs to do to really make sure their senior team is prepared to have great conversations with people who can help get a deal started?
One word comes to mind. It's orchestration. A seller becomes great when they graduate from what we all kind of think of as the role of a seller, and they become more of it's like the CEO of a deal, right?
Yeah.
There's project management. You could use the analogy of being the director of a Broadway show. It's pulling away from being, to use an American sports analogy, the quarterback on the field making the big passes,
Right.
and becoming the coach on the sideline, deploying the right people at the right time and preparing them and drills with skills, etc.
And well, that's
So
why I think the word orchestrating is perfect for it. When you think of a conductor of an orchestra, right? They tell every instrument when to play. And sometimes we all have to play together in the orchestra, and sometimes one instrument plays all by itself. I mean, it's really a great analogy.
yeah. And something that you said a little bit earlier too, a lot of CEOs are talking about this whole idea about going up market. And
Yeah.
going up market can be different for every company. Maybe you're
Mhm.
jumping from 100K deals to $1 million deals, or you're going, instead of going for mid-market, you start going for commercial or enterprise accounts at $1 billion revenue and up. And I'm seeing there's a lot of discussion between the C-suite and the board. Hey, it's time to go up market. But how it gets executed on the ground is they take the same team with the same go-to-market and the
No.
same tools, and they say, just take that and just aim it higher and aim it bigger and try to go make something happen. And it really falls flat. But I can
No,
see
it
you want
doesn't
to
work.
chime in.
We both know it. We've seen it so many times. It doesn't work.
So if I was a CEO and I was either told or it was my idea, it's time to go up market, what I would do is I would look at my sales team and say, do I have any standouts? Do I have any strategic thinkers? If I do, I can start this little project with them at the center. If I don't, I really need to go hire somebody,
Right.
because you can teach sellers how to do at least some of this, but it will take time to teach, and it will take less than no time to just hire.
Right. Right. No, I couldn't agree with you more. You definitely have to, if you want to really do mega deals, right? Go up market, whatever you want to call it, but you're wanting to do bigger deals with bigger companies, you have to have the right team. You cannot just take the team you have and say, go after bigger companies. Here's your new list. These companies are bigger. They can pay more. I wish it was that easy, right? That would be so
Oh my
cool.
God.
But yeah, no, not at all. So I think that's really important. Okay, so wrapping this up, for a CEO who wants to grow their company, and they know that in order to do that, they have to get larger deals with larger companies, where should they start today?
The first is to sit down with the CRO and pick the companies, right? And then exactly going through what you just said, I would start at a very senior level, and I would say, okay, we are going to start with a very tight scope. I would pick the accounts, and I would pick the team, and that team has got to have the quarterback, using that term again, but using the kind of the CEO of the deal, the right sales leader, all the way up to whatever level of seniority makes sense. Doesn't have to be the CEO, could be, but it doesn't have to. And then something that we didn't talk about, we won't have time to here, is engaging. Once you've done the research, you have your story, and you start to take it to them. The whole idea is that you're going to treat this one account special. This is they are different, and they are special, and they're going to get the white glove treatment. And when they look at this and they think, these are smart people, I'm getting access to the folks at the very top, the value story makes sense, this stuff adds up well. And I know that they haven't done it with a company of my size before, but because of how they're coming to me, this might be worth a shot. Let's see if we can start somewhere with that.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, gosh, this is a great topic. We could probably talk about it for a couple more hours and dig in. But your book is available for those CEOs who want to know more about this, Mega Deal Secrets. And we'll also put some information up at the end. But I have 3 questions that I want to ask you before we part ways today. And the first question is, what's a book that every CEO should read?
Yeah, we shared a little bit about this one. So I love the book called The Power of Moments.
Yes.
It is not necessarily a sales book. It's not necessarily a management book, but the value that I get out of reading and rereading that book is a couple things. One is the reality that the human brain is hardwired to remember 2 points in any experience. One is the most intense part, whether it's pleasure or pain, and the end. And the deeper you go into the whole idea that these are moments in an experience, comes the idea, what if you can engineer moments? And whether you're trying to influence your team, whether you're trying to sell a deal, or whether you're trying to build a brand through content, engineering moments are going to have an impact on the outcome. And that's an incredible concept, and it's an incredible skill that CEOs should leverage.
Love that. Yes, absolutely. Think about moments. That book is so powerful. Okay, next question. What is a podcast that you listen to because it makes you think differently?
I love NPR, and their podcast is called Up First from NPR.
Oh, yes.
And everything from the closest thing I can find to balanced reporting, to really refreshing takes on life in America, different perspectives from different kind of personalities. I just love it.
Yeah, I love NPR too. They have so many great shows. So if you're not familiar, go check it out. Lots of podcasts there. All right, last question. What does every CEO need to know to win in this market?
So along with the theme, what we've been talking today, I have a hypothesis, which is that the ROI on the time that a CEO spends on these large and strategic deals is among, if not at the top of how they could spend their time, because it's such a little amount of time for them to do these cameo appearances, and yet it can support the closing of deals with bigger logos that bring in more revenue, and it's sticky revenue that can last for years. And the rest of the team can, care for that engagement. But the CEO's time is a huge lever in getting those things done. And that just adds enterprise value right and left.
Yeah, it's part of the CEO's role in sales to be involved in these mega deals, right? It's an important part, and the ROI is big. Oh my gosh, Jamal, thank you so much for being on the show today. I've really enjoyed our conversation.
I did too, Alice. This did nothing but give me energy. I appreciate it.
Awesome. Have a great day.
You as well.
If you enjoyed the show, please like and subscribe, and we'll see you next week.